Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a story that, well, it really pushes the limits of what it means to be human. We're heading into the Andes to unpack a story of survival that is just absolutely harrowing.
You know, this whole ordeal, every single choice they made, every sacrifice, it all comes down to one number.
That's right. 72 days, trapped, completely alone in the snow. For that long, a group of crash survivors had to, well, they had to completely redefine their own humanity just to stay alive. So, okay, let's dive into how it all began.
Okay, so our story starts back on October 13th, 1972. You've got this young Uruguayan rugby team, just full of energy and life, and they've chartered a flight to go play a match over in Chile.
So you can just imagine the vibe on that plane, right? It was absolutely electric. These are college kids, a rugby team, goofing around, and they have no idea, absolutely no idea, that the plane they're on, a Fairchild FH227, was kind of known for being, well, underpowered. Not exactly what you want for flying over the Andes. And since there were some empty seats, they invited friends and family. That's how a young guy named Nando Parado ended up there, traveling with his mom and his sister.
And this is where everything goes wrong. It all boils down to a really simple but totally fatal miscalculation. The pilot thought he'd cleared the mountain pass. He timed it at just 3 minutes, but it should have taken 11. So, thinking he's safe, that he's over the city of Curacao, he turns north to start descending into Santiago. But he wasn't over Curacao. He was flying straight into the heart of the mountains.
The impact was just catastrophic. In an instant, the wings and the tail are just torn right off. Several people are actually thrown out of the plane into the freezing air. But then, something incredible happens. The front part of the fuselage, where most people were, starts rocketing down a glacier like a sled. And it's that snow, that very same snow that cushions the final impact and miraculously saves so many of the people inside.
So out of the 45 people on that flight, 33 actually survived the crash itself. I mean, that's a staggering number, right? But their ordeal, their real test against man versus mountain, oh, it was only just getting started.
See, surviving the crash was one thing, but staying alive, that wasn't a one-time event. No, this was a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour battle against a completely impossible environment. Okay, so picture this. You're stranded at nearly 12,000 feet with basically nothing. You're dressed for a weekend trip, not an Arctic expedition. At night, the temperature plummets to minus 30 Celsius. The little bit of food they had, some chocolate, a few bottles of wine, it was gone within days. And the worst part? They actually saw search planes flying overhead, but the white fuselage of their plane was completely invisible against the snow, just perfectly camouflaged. That first night, the cold was just brutal. It claimed 5 more lives. By the time the sun came up the next morning, their group was already down to 28. And then, on day 10, they get the final blow. They'd managed to get a small radio working, and they hear the news: the official search has been called off. Just like that. The world had given them up for dead. Can you even imagine? They were totally, utterly alone. Whatever little hope they were clinging to, it was just gone. So, with no hope of rescue and the last of the food gone, they are now facing a choice. A choice that just strips away every single rule, every societal norm they had ever known. And this wasn't some philosophical debate. It was a brutal, stark reality. Option 1, starve to death. Option 2, cross a line that civilization says you just don't cross. Eat the bodies of their dead friends. Now you have to remember, these were mostly devout Catholic boys, so the weight of this decision was just immense. It led to these intense debates, morality versus the raw animal instinct to just live. To even begin to cope with this unimaginable choice, they made a pact. They all agreed, right there and then. If I die, I want you to use my body so that you can live. It was their way of transforming this horrifying act of desperation into an act of collective sacrifice, an act of love even. So just as they settle into this grim new reality, this new routine for survival, the mountain decides it isn't done with them yet. It strikes again. On the 18th night, while they're all asleep inside the fuselage, a massive avalanche comes crashing down. It buries the plane completely. For 3 days, they're entombed under the snow, trapped in total darkness, with the bodies of the 8 friends who were just killed.
This avalanche, it was just a devastating, silent blow in the dark. It instantly reduced their number to only 19. And now the survivors weren't just stranded, they were buried alive, more hopeless than ever before.
Okay, so their numbers are dwindling. Their shelter is basically a tomb, and they finally understand a fundamental truth. Nobody is coming for them. If they're going to survive, they have to save themselves. Their only hope is to walk out of the Andes.
And this is where human ingenuity really becomes their lifeline. I mean, this is incredible. They invent snowshoes using seat cushions and wire from the plane, just so they won't sink into the snow. The whole group pulls what's left of their resources. They stitch together a sleeping bag out of the plane's insulation and give the biggest food rations to the 3 strongest guys chosen for the trek: Nando Parado, Roberto Canessa, and Antonio Vizintin. It was a total team effort for this one final gambit.
So after 3 grueling days of climbing this massive peak, they finally reach the summit. They're praying to see the green valleys of Chile. And what do they see instead? Mountains. An endless, jagged sea of snow-capped mountains in every single direction. I mean, talk about a soul-crushing blow. But Nando Parado, a man who had already lost his mother and his sister in this crash, he just refuses to give up. He turns to Roberto and says, "We may be walking to our deaths, but I would rather walk to meet my death than wait for it to come to me." They send Antonio back to the fuselage, and the two of them just keep going.
That single decision, to keep walking when all hope seemed lost, well, that decision would change absolutely everything.
For 10 straight days, Nando and Roberto trekked for over 60 kilometers through that unforgiving terrain. They were weak, emaciated, but they found a small river valley and made a desperate gamble to follow it downstream, just hoping, praying it would lead them somewhere, anywhere with people.
And then, on the 10th day of their trek, exhausted and basically at the end of their rope, they see it. Across a raging river, a man on a horse, the first sign of another human being in 72 days. The river's too loud to yell across, so Nando quickly scribbles a note, ties it to a rock, and hurls it over. The note says who they are, and that 14 of their friends are still alive back in the mountains. And just like that, help was finally on the way.
In the end, 16 people made it out alive. Helicopters, with Nando as their guide, rescued the others who are still waiting on the mountain. You know, their story isn't just about survival. It's a profound and honestly pretty unsettling look at the strength and the cost of the human will to live. And it leaves us with a really tough question, one that gets to the core of it all. If you were stripped of everything, food, shelter, all hope, what choices would you make to survive?